Hello everyone and welcome back to JB's Total Gaming. The Fortuna 2.0 update is out, so a big update to the really big update that was Fortuna. So we've got three new weapons. We've got a Prime unvaulting, including Mesa Prime as we're showing off. We've got new floofs. We've got the first of the orb fights against the Profit Taker and the positives and the frustrations that come along with that. But the first thing that I want to do a video on is one of the new Prime weapons that came out, the Akjagara Prime. I am a fan of the Akjagara. I mentioned it in the previous video, and there is debate out there as to whether the Akjagara were good weapons or not. Some people thought they were, some people thought they weren't. There are certainly weapons that I enjoyed. So do the Prime weapons solve that issue? They're definitely cool looking, but are they a weapon now that people are just going to objectively think is good? Well, let's look at some of the improvements. Well, if we look at the board here and we compare the base Akjagara to the Akjagara Prime, you can see this is a weapon that they made a lot of improvements to. Sometimes the Prime weapon comes out and it's an improvement, but it isn't massive. Sometimes it's a massive improvement, and this is a massive improvement. So there's a big boost to accuracy and things like that. But let's talk about damage real quick. So the impact and the puncture damage have gone down, but they've only gone down by a little bit. The base slash damage has gone up by quite a bit. So because this is a status-based weapon, it used to be pretty much entirely a status-based weapon, and now you can definitely build it for a hybrid build with crit and status. But that raise in slash damage compared to other ones is nice because you want those slash procs to go off. So that's a pretty big thing. Even though this was a status weapon before, it is increased in its status chance. And one really, really nice thing that I find pretty interesting is the critical chance has gone way up. The critical multiplier has gone up a little bit, but the critical chance going from a measly 6% to 18% means that before, if you wanted to do a hybrid build that both focused on critical damage and on status, you basically had to have a Riven and like primed pistol gamut in order to get even decent status chance on it before. Now that they have tripled that from 6 to 18, that is not the case. So let's look at some potential builds that you can do with this weapon and some different things. Let's talk about a straight up status build first. So if we are building and we're going to put on things that you would just expect to have on. So obviously we're going to have Hornet Strike. That's just kind of goes without saying. And you're pretty much almost always going to have the multi-shot mods on. We're going to show off that Riven here in a little bit. So there's a little bit of a teaser there for you. So you're going to want to have multi-shot mods on. That's pretty much goes without saying. That's going to be true for most things. So barrel diffusion basically guarantees we're going to be shooting a second shot, sometimes a third shot, and with lethal torrent we're actually going to be at least shooting 2 shots most of the time, 3 shots, actually 80% of the time, and also a 60% increase to fire rate, which is really nice. Now let's talk about if we want to do this as a purely status build. So we're going to go ahead and put on the 60-60 mods you might expect. Obviously, depending on the combination of ways that we put this in, we're going to get different combinations of damage. So here we have gas and magnetic. Now, let's say I want to check something though. So we're going to take these off. Now, one thing to bear in mind is if you're checking your status chance, be sure to do that without multi-shot because it checks your total status chance for all your shots. So if we are at 100% before multi-shot, and this more is important for like pellet-based shotguns that have a lot of pellets out there that you all want to proc a status chance, but even with this, we're firing basically 2 shots at a time. Most of the time, each of those shots is going to fire 3 shots, sometimes 2 shots. So we're shooting out a decent amount of shots even though this is a semi-automatic weapon. So getting to 100% status means each one of those shots is going to proc a status, which is nice. Now what status is that going to be? Well, right now, magnetic and gas are there, and we can see the slash damage here. Now one thing to bear in mind is these damages, slash, impact, and puncture, are 4 times more likely to proc than the elemental damages. So basically, if you want to think about it, you can multiply this 92 times 4, and that's where the damage that you want to compare it to. So slash is still going to be the most likely to proc. So let's go ahead and put these multi-shot mods back on. So here we have a kind of base, kind of standard 100% status build. What else do we want to put on here? Well, for me personally, I usually go with a 90% mod for whatever I want to proc between these. So let's say, so gas and magnetic, that's particularly good against the Grineer enemies. They have shields, and then the gas damage actually gets through their shields. So let's say I'm less worried about dealing a lot of damage to their shields, and I want to kill them with gas damage and with slash procs. So if that's the sort of thing that I'm going for, then I'm probably going to say, let's add pathogen rounds, or we can add fire damage, or whatever. So we're going to add either fire or the toxin damage in order to bring that to the forefront and make that much more likely to proc. Why don't we go ahead and check this out? Now, part of the reason I don't want to do 100% status build against the Grineer is because then that's the Corrosive Blast combination. We're going to be knocking them around. We want to show off some different enemies and some different builds. So I do want to point out that the 100% status build is perfectly viable, and we're going to show it off against some different enemies. So for this one, we will actually go against the Corpus, and then we'll switch to Grineer for maybe the hybrid builds. Alright, so let's go ahead with level 100 kind of sorty level. Let's go with the slow combat here. I don't know. They have actually a decent amount of health as far as these enemies. So let's show off what we can do with a full status build. So as you can see, we're going to proc a whole bunch of status, and then that gas status proc is going to go around. So while these aren't necessarily the toughest enemies in the game, I wanted to show you that the 100% status build, let's say there's a status that you're going to want to proc, you can do all kinds of that and do all kinds of work with this weapon. And overall, it performs pretty well. However, for me personally, the 100% status build, while it is really nice, is not necessarily the build that I have ended up really using as I play. So let's go ahead and take a look at a slightly different build. Alright, now let's talk about a slightly different build as far as a hybrid build. Now for me personally, I have found that when using this, I've had pretty good luck with just going with 2 of the 6060 mods. So if I go ahead and take off my multi-shot mods here, you can see I still have 70% status, which is 2 of the 6060 mods on. And I personally think that that is good enough for this weapon for a hybrid build. Now, there are going to be those of you out there who disagree, but I just want to point out that a hybrid build is definitely possible. Now, right now, I have Prime Pistol Gambit on here. I do not have Prime Target Cracker just because I don't have it yet. If I did, obviously I would only use this on this build. And right now, I'm up to 51% critical chance. With the multi-shot we have on this weapon, I think that is definitely pretty good. Now, there are different ways you can go with this. You can even kind of back off of the status if you want, and go and you can try to do things like putting on hydraulic crosshairs, where on a headshot, you're increasing your critical chance, and then sharpened bullets, where on a kill, you are increasing your critical damage when aiming and things like that. Now, that is stuff that I put on my Catch Moon gun, but that has over 10%, over 100% critical chance, and I think it works very, very effectively on that build. But I personally found it not working all that well. So there's a couple of different options with this. So this one, I'm basically replacing 2 of the 6060 mods, and I'm putting on Prime Pistol Gambit and Prime Target Cracker if I have it. Now, with this build, again, you can kind of go a couple of different ways. Like I said, I don't really suggest, again, you can try it out, but I don't really suggest going kind of full crit damage with this build. But there's a couple of things we can do with this. We can continue on the corrosive damage. So we can just make this proc a decent amount of time, especially with the multi-shot, a good amount of corrosive, and do quite a bit of damage. Now, if we want a little bit more status, though, that is something we can definitely do. Because I don't really like, say, the blast damage or something like that. Or even if I really want corrosive to happen, let's see here. So let's go with... So if I wanted to, I could go with, say, adding Scorch to this build. So my heat damage is still going to be way below my corrosive damage, and I'm going to increase that status. That's really going to be up to you. I've experimented with both. You can run into situations where you can overstrip enemies before you kill them, and so basically what I would suggest, if you're running into an issue where you're overstripping enemies of armor, maybe lowering the critical chance a little bit instead of running that third mod to bring up your status as high as possible, just increasing your corrosive chance. So putting on and basically something that's going to increase our corrosive. So there's a lot of different options for this last slot. And because we want to try this against tougher enemies, let's go ahead and try this build here, this hybrid build, which I personally like quite a bit. I don't think we need super high status chance with this. I want to get my corrosive damage as high as possible so that my crits are doing a good amount, and then you can see my slash proc. So this is not a viral slash build, so I'm not worried about that coming off. I just want to show you that you do get good bleed procs with this, and if I just keep firing and I don't wait for those bleed procs, you can see that we're making pretty quick work of a level 120, level 100 corrupted heavy gunners. So for this being, an effective sidearm, there was questions as to whether the Akjagara was a good weapon before. I don't think there's any doubt seeing what this build is doing here. We're getting enough of a corrosive proc without overstripping. Again, I could put like the heat on here or something like that, or even the cold, without getting that blast damage and knocking these guys around if I want to. And enough bleed procs that I don't have to finish the enemy off in order to completely finish them off. Now you might say then, what about a viral build? So you know what, let's go ahead and do that. And while we're showing off the viral build, let's go ahead, I'm going to get rid of pathogen rounds here. I won't be able to fit that on, so yeah, let's do that. And here's the deal. And put target cracker back on because this is the build I'm going to use for corrosive. However, let's go ahead and use this and show this off. So initially I had a Riven. You can see this has been rolled 15 times. I got a Riven off someone and been rolled a few times. I rolled it a decent amount more and ended up getting even higher damage and higher multi-shot than these, additional flight speed, and then minus critical damage. And on the Akjagara, that was fine because there was only 6% crit chance. It wasn't happening all that often. I wasn't building for crit. I ended up not liking that because I really like the hybrid build. So I rerolled this several more times, and now I have damage and multi-shot and maximum ammunition, which isn't really a bad thing. It's not the best positive, but it's not nothing. If I don't want to run Carrier Prime or something like that, then I can worry less about it if I want to make this my main weapon. Now, obviously, I would really like if this had critical chance or something on that to make those crits happen even more often. Alright, so let's go ahead and show off what this can do. Now, some people really like viral builds, some people don't. One of the advantages of viral builds is I can get the enemy to a certain point, and then as you can see, the viral builds, because they lower health by half, basically those slash procs can then work on the enemy, and as long as the viral build, or the viral proc stays on, then the enemy will go down. And you can see both because of the effects of the viral proc making our, giving our enemy less effective health so the slash procs go through. You can use this build. Obviously, you're not necessarily going to have a Riven for it. If you don't, again, there are different things you can use in this slot. You can use one of the elements to give you more viral. You can use another one to give you more status proc. So if you don't want to use... let's say you want to make sure you get as many status procs as possible, instead of obviously this Riven that you may not have, you can put on a 90% mod, let's say for cold if you want to, or you can put maybe electric or something on there if you want the status chance to be higher of the 60/60 mods. So for me personally, I'm not usually a big fan of viral builds. However, I think that's what I'm going to go in with this one. You can, as we talked about in the beginning, the slash damage is particularly high, and while this isn't necessarily the greatest, viral slash weapon ever created, it's pretty good, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. I've been having a lot of fun formatting it over and over again, because this was a weapon I enjoyed before when there was a question as to whether this weapon was good or not, and now I think there's no doubt that it is. The Riven prices on Akjagara, because it's new and because it's way better than before, and because it is a 5 out of 5 disposition, obviously you're going to get some very powerful Rivens. This isn't exactly what I'd call a god roll. I'd consider this a very good Riven. Obviously, damage and multi-shot are two of the things you're going to want on pretty much any weapon. I think critical chance would also be fantastic on this weapon. There's going to be a lot of good Rivens out there, and the prices are kind of insane. Thankfully, I picked this up. This is one of the only Rivens I actually bought off somebody, just because I heard the Akjagara Prime was coming out, and I liked it, and I picked up just a random one that somebody had relatively cheaply, and re-rolled it a decent amount. But even without this, there are lots of builds you can do with this. You can do 100% status build. You can do... viral slash. You can do, one particular type of damage, and I think they all work pretty well on this weapon. For me personally, I enjoy the viral slash build, even if I, don't have this. Obviously, this helps pretty much any build I want to use with it. It just gives me more damage in multi-shot. However, I think the Akjagara Prime is a pretty versatile weapon. If you hated it before, you may not like it now, but it's hard to dispute that the weapon, there is no doubt that it is at least good now. So hopefully you found that informative. We'll be back with more videos, maybe a video on the first orb fight. I'm not sure what we're really going to do next, but I definitely want to get this out there because the Akjagara is a weapon I've always enjoyed, and now, like it or not, it's definitively, in my opinion, the Prime version at least, a good weapon, whether you like it or not. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and we'll talk to you again soon.